Hello and welcome to the Turf and Touchdowns podcast, episode 6. We are focusing on the NFL action on today's podcast. We're going to get a little bit more controversial, but more on that a little further down the line. My name's Luke Elder, joined as always by Tom Collins. This might be the first show, Tom, that we fall out on, so we'll see how we go.
Yeah, it could be. We've shared notes, which is different to normal, and there are a couple of controversial takes. So we'll see what happens in the next 15, 20 minutes or so. But it's good to be back with another NFL podcast. And I saw Scott Hansen of Red Zone fame the other day tweet that we are midway through the off-season. 15 Sundays have gone by since the Super Bowl. There are 15 more Sundays to go until the NFL season's back. So this seems a good time to talk about fantasy leagues.
Yes, it's going to be fantasy focused today. It was a case of about 100 days to the NFL season starts, which is just wonderful. I'm not wishing the summer away or anything because we have got family holidays and plenty more to look forward to, but it is a nice feeling when the NFL season comes around. But we don't want to wish our lives away too much, but we are focusing on the fantasy side of things today. Just before we get into things, if you do enjoy this podcast, do subscribe down below. Follow us on our social media platforms. We are on Twitter /X as @TurfTouchdowns, and every other single social media platform. We are @Turf and Touchdowns. But focusing on fantasy today, away from the betting side of things, just because there's not many things to bet on at this time of season, we are going to go for players to avoid and also players to draft. We've done 2 each. Tom said that we've done notes. We've shared names.
Yeah, names.
But it's going to be players that, for ADP purposes, at the moment, that we don't like, and players that we do like. But we've gone away from the top of the draft, I think, for the most part. Yeah,
I think with this kind of subject, you need to have half controversial takes, but I mean, it would be foolish if we were to say players we like, Bijan Robinson or, anyone like that,
Rubbish.
Because, they're going to be good. It'd be stupid. We'll get to the end of the season and people are like, what are you talking about? But equally, we don't want to be saying people we don't like and then just coming up with someone who's going to play probably one game or about 5 snaps all year. So we've got middling players that people will be thinking about drafting, hopefully, in their leagues, and we can persuade them to or not to draft them.
Yeah, and please note as well, for YouTube, Seattle Seahawks jumper, Tom's just dressed as a golfer.
Well, yeah. Unlike you with your Seattle jumper, you're not going to go and play for Seattle. I am going to go and play golf.
You don't know that.
If you do play for Seattle, I'm not drafting you. I'll tell you that for something.
No, because I would be the water boy, and you can't draft water boys. But we've all seen the film. It works out. Right, let's jump into to things. We have got players that we do like, and one of my players that I do like, I've already mentioned on this podcast, and you were a bit mocking of it. Mocking, is that right?
Well, I wouldn't say mocking. You think he's going to have a huge year. I think he'll have a middling year. So we'll see. Talk us through it.
I think he's got top 15 upside.
Yeah, I don't
in the wide receiver ranks, that is. Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's got an ADP currently on Sleeper of 65. Calvin Ridley's gone. Big thing. Christian Kirk didn't get many red zone looks last year. What player in the NFL, by the way, do you think had the most red zone targets last season?
Amon-Ra St. Brown?
No, I mean, there's a clue in what I just said.
Oh, was it Christian Kirk?
No, Calvin Ridley.
Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, which is a nice thing to be leaving behind for a guy like Christian Kirk, who's going to inherit the lion's share of the work. They've drafted Brian Thomas. They brought in Gabe Davis. Neither of them immediately are going to be big factors. Gabe Davis, we know he's very hot and cold from Buffalo. Brian Thomas, I think he'll get better the longer the season goes on, and he's probably going to be wide receiver 2 in Jacksonville. Zay Jones has also gone now as well. Since that podcast where we did mention Christian Kirk, he's managed to go elsewhere. I think he's in Arizona now. Yeah. Christian Kirk last year saw 85 targets on 12 games. That includes his injury game and also the first game of the year, which was just an absolute nightmare. I think he had one catch for not very many yards. in 2022, he played the full 17 games, which counts as Tom's next point of this guy always gets injured. He saw 133 targets, which is fair going. I think he'll get even more this year. On the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, there are 239 vacated wide receiver targets. He will be the main slot guy. He will be the main guy for Trevor Lawrence. Honestly, their second receiver is probably going to be Evan Ingram, who had a fantastic year last year. But I love Christian Kirk. Like I say, I think he's got top 15 upside. He's going at an ADP of 65. Draft Christian Kirk whenever you can.
It's an interesting point. I'm not completely against Kirk, I have to say. I don't love him, but I don't hate him. I think the ADP right now, the average draft position of 65 is probably about right, in my opinion. Obviously, you disagree with that. I'm just not a fan of this Jacksonville offense. And as I've already mentioned in previous shows, I think he's very injury prone. He's unlikely, in my opinion, to play all 17 games. And therefore, you have that risk factor of how long he's going to be out for that you have to calculate. So I don't hate it, but I also don't love it.
I love it. I think Christian Kirk's going to have a fantastic season. That's my first guy to draft. I'll be taking him whenever I possibly can. And honestly, if he becomes my wide receiver 2 in some teams, I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. If he's wide receiver 3, love it. That's a fair amount of depth. We'll save our Seahawk chat for the moment. I'll go to your first guy. Who's your first guy to draft?
My first guy is going to be Jameson Williams. He's entering his third year with the Detroit
Love
Lions
it.
now in the NFL. You were all over this guy last year, weren't you?
I was. Okay, in best ball leagues, I think I took this guy in like 35% of leagues.
Yeah, you were heavy in, but he basically didn't even play last year until game 10 after their bye week. It was a bit ridiculous. Just to give some backstory behind Jameson Williams, I watched him when he was at Alabama in his last year of college, his third year, and he was phenomenal. He racked up over 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 80 or so catches, 79 I think it was. He was just Alabama's main guy. And if you don't watch college football, Alabama, basically the best team year in, year out, give or take one or two. So, he was the best guy on the best team, and he showcased his talents. He then went to Detroit, but he was suspended for the first part of his rookie season, and then didn't really make the field thereafter. I think the Lions kind of thought it was a bedding in period for Jameson. People like Luke thought going into year 2 he was going to be a superstar. I wasn't so keen, I have to say, because of all of their weapons last year. And to be fair, it surprised me and obviously everyone else that he didn't play until week 10 virtually. I mean, he had a few snaps, but he was not a major part of the offense until week 10. In the latter part of the season, he started to show signs that he was getting to grips with the play calling and the playbook and everything he needed to do in the NFL. He still didn't wow everyone, but he was starting to look like he was going to be a part of this offense. Now we're entering year 3. Jameson has to show that he's got talent this year, or he's gone, basically. And the Lions have now presented him with the perfect opportunity of getting rid of all their other wide receivers aside from Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's going to be the number 2 or number 3 guy, depending on how well he starts the year. I think he could really shine. And his ADP right now, what is it? Maybe 124, I think I've got written down, 50th wide receiver. That just astounds me. I think you've got to take him slightly higher. Look, he's not going to be the best receiver in the league, but he's definitely better than the 50th wide receiver, which he's currently going at in drafts.
Yeah, the thing with Jameson Williams, when we get to draft season, 2 months' time or so, he won't be that high. He will drop because there's going to be a lot of hype around him. We've already heard Dan Campbell going, "Oh, he's a man on a mission," and at the end of the last year, he's one of the guys now, and he's earned his place in that team. Now, I know coach speak in the NFL can be just a lot of nonsense. Dan Campbell's not really that guy. He just says it how it is. If he doesn't like a guy, he'll say, "I do not like this guy, and he's not going to play for my team." He did that with Jameson Williams last year after the betting ban sort of ended. Jameson Williams was okay to end last year, including in the playoffs. I think they're trusting him a lot more. You've got a guy that you could take at pick 100 plus, we'll just sort of say that ballpark, that is probably going to be a ready starter for the year. I think he's a guy that could put in loads of depth. Yeah, I love this. I know we said we're going to be controversial, but I'm a big fan of Jameson Williams. I'm all on board. Let's move on to... Let's tell a story of last year. Myself and Tom started up a dynasty league. Tom is commissioner, doing such a good job. We traded before the season started for Drake London, I gave away,
Mm-hmm.
and a first, I think it was, for Jackson Smith and Jigba and a first. Now, at the moment, Drake London, your side has won that trade. And I know Drake London's going very high in trades this year, but I feel that's going to be a trade that's a lot closer than it looks right now for this season.
You're all over Jackson Smith and Jigba. You know what? I think it was probably a fair trade. I definitely got the better side of it on year one. But moving forward, I mean, Atlanta's offense is just tough to trust. So Drake London's going to get his fair share, but he's not really going to be this high ceiling guy. Maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba has that more potential. I don't hate what you're about to say, but I'll come back with an opposite opinion at the end.
Welcome to Seahawks Chat Weekly. Draft Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's got an ADP of 96 at the moment. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you're not a Seahawks fan, you're thinking JSN was so disappointing in his rookie year. And I get it, but he wasn't. He was very good in his rookie year. He just wasn't given the chances. All season, his highest snap percentage was 82% in a single game. And that was a blowout against Baltimore, where I think DK Metcalf was even benched. So it was just effectively Pete Carroll saying, go on then, JSN, you have a go. Pete Carroll does not like rushing rookies. Never did. New coaching staff have come in. I feel like JSN, I'm not going to say could be their guy because DK Metcalf is there, but he's going to get a lot more work. Tyler Lockett, he had his contract restructured so he could stay in Seattle for an extra couple of years. I think Tyler Lockett might be the sort of third wide receiver / go-to guy in a bit of a pinch. He'll still be used. Jackson Smith and Jigba's ADOT, average depth of target, which is an important stat in fantasy football, was 5.9 yards last year. Now, that is dreadful. That's one of the lowest in the leagues for a main receiver. Put this into perspective, Tom. Adam Thielen, not a deep guy, right? His
Correct.
ADOT was 7.6. And he had Bryce Young throwing at him in an absolutely disgusting Carolina offense. DK Metcalf's ADOT was 12.8. Tyler Lockett's was 10.8. There were times at the season where Jackson Smith and Jigba was getting plays thrown to him behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
He just wasn't used effectively in any way in the early part of things. Shane Waldron's gone. He's now in Chicago. That's great news. He was awful as an offensive coordinator in Seattle. Ryan Grubb's moved in. Any time you've seen Ryan Grubb in college, Washington being the latest of them with Michael Penix, the slot guy has just been fantastic. That's JSN. This is very much going to be his year. I love JSN for this year. However, on the other side of the field in Seattle, Tom, is your
DK
guy.
Metcalf. And this is my area where I now say, don't draft JSN above the ADP. Don't mind him at the ADP. Don't draft him above him, but draft DK Metcalf prior to 40th overall in the draft. He's currently going at 40th ADP, 21st overall wide receiver on rankings. I think he's way better than that. You've already touched on Ryan Grubb. You've already touched on how his offense usually works. They're pass heavy. They like to go down the field, snap up some big yardage plays, and DK is the guy. Now, I understand JSN is going to be used more. He's going to be utilized in this offense, and Tyler Lockett's share will probably decrease. But DK's won't. He's the guy outside. He is their main threat. He is going to be running go routes. He's going to be running posts. He's going to be running ins, outs, hitches, everything. He's going to be the one that is always your first look. If you go back on his last 4 years in the league, DK Metcalf's finished 7th, 14th, 16th, and 21st overall in PPR leagues for points over the season. He's currently drafted as 21st overall in the wide receiver rankings. People think he's going to fall off. I'm having none of that. I think DK is going to be back into the top 10 this year. He is a guy I really want on my side. And I actually think Seattle and that whole division as a whole are going to be firing in points week after week. I really like DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I think both JSN and DK Metcalf are going to have big years. The one thing I like about both of them, you're drafting you're drafting both guys in a pretty realistic area. As you say, DK Metcalf, DK Metcalf, he could be quite easily top 10 wide receiver material this year. JSN, top 20. I think that's realistic. We spoke about Drake London. Drake London's being drafted midway through the second round. I think Drake London's being drafted at his ceiling at the moment. So it's not something that leaps off the page, but we're focusing on Seattle. I'm team JSN, your team DK Metcalf, but I think we're both giving respect to either side of things. However, let's move into the guys that we don't like for this year. And this is sort of going against the grain. I'm just taking on a whole family with mine, but I went first in the guys to take. So Tom, I'll let you go with the guys to avoid first.
Yeah, this is going to be a controversial. And as I said at the top of this show, the aim was to come up with people that you might think of taking high up in the draft, in my opinion. And I don't think you should take them at their ADP. First of all, do not draft Debo Samuel. Now, everyone is going to be coming in for Debo. This is a guy with Swiss Army knife guy, can run the ball, can catch the ball, can basically do everything. Plows through defenders, doesn't go down at the first time of contact, yards after catch, yards after carry. I mean, this guy is at the top of the league. However, he last year produced one of his best seasons. He finished 15th in terms of scoring in fantasy leagues. I don't think he's going to be utilised anywhere near as much. And the reason for that is generally due to injury issues. He's 28 now. He's had lots of problems in his last couple of seasons, whether that be with hamstring injuries or shoulder injuries. And I just don't think they're going to be putting him right on the firing line every single play like they have been in the past. They've got Brandon Ayuk. They've got George Kittle. They've got Ricky Pearsall, who they drafted in the NFL draft this year. They have plenty of other weapons, and I think Brock Purdy will be limiting the times he looks at Debo. Obviously, I haven't even mentioned CMC, Christian McCaffrey, who gets most of the plays at San Fran, whether that be receiving or running. So I think Debo may have a little bit of a drop-off this year, and he's going so high in drafts, I think I can categorize him as going too high ADP, and you should just wait. Hold your horses on Debo. I think there are better options at his position.
ADP 32. I'm going to go against you on this one. I drafted Debo last year, and I traded him away fairly early on, and I regretted it pretty much from the outset.
Right.
He had a good year last year, and he also got injured, which obviously didn't help things out a great deal. But in and around him, there are two receivers either side of him. Tell me which of these guys you'd rather over Debo. Mike Evans and DJ Moore are going just ahead. Malik Neighbors and Michael Pittman are going just afterwards. If you say Malik Neighbors, I will hit you.
Okay, so this is redraft league we're talking about, not dynasty. So I can't say Neighbors. I can't say Neighbors. That's fair. Obviously, in dynasty, I would definitely say Neighbors. I think Mike Evans will score more than Debo. I think Michael Pittman will score more than Debo too. And DJ Moore in that Chicago offense, who knows what he's going to do? Depends on Caleb Williams this year. But I would rather the majority of those guys around him. One last thing I didn't mention about Debo. You look over those last three seasons, the receptions, the amount of times he's caught the ball, has dramatically decreased year on year. I mean, back in 2021, he had 120 catches. 2022, he had 94 catches. Last year, he had 89. I wouldn't be surprised if that went all the way down to 80 or maybe even into the 70s this year. And obviously, with fewer catches comes fewer yards, comes fewer fantasy points.
I'm not buying it. But if you want, you're talking about taking on big guys. Let's take on a real big guy. Do not draft Josh Allen.
I don't mind it. Okay, I don't mind this at all. And your reasoning is going to be what everyone else thinks the reasoning is. But
yeah, there is a case to be made. He's been drafted as the QB1 right now, which I don't think he's got a hope in hell of being a QB1 this year. Not being a QB1, being the QB1. He lost both Stephon Diggs, he lost Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis, we poked fun at, we made jokes at, but 45 catches on the year, 746 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's still sort of nice enough size shoes to fill. They haven't got a wide receiver one, unless Keon Coleman's going to come in and suddenly be the guy, which I don't really see that happening, especially not week in, week out. Dalton Kincaid is probably going to be their passing leader. It honestly is a very, very Patrick Mahomes type feel from last year where he had just Travis Kelce to throw at. Rashee Rice came in as a rookie and he helped him out a touch. Mahomes was disappointing last year. If you drafted Patrick Mahomes as your QB1, probably the first quarterback off the board last year in drafts, you were disappointed and he hurt your fantasy team. He was okay, but he wasn't brilliant. Now, last year, he also had 15 rushing touchdowns. This is Josh Allen. That was 6 more than any other year in the league. And that was when he was rushing more as well. End of the season, he just stocked up. He had multiple games where he had 2 rushing touchdowns, pretty much from the one. That's not going to happen again this year. They were running the ball a lot more back end of last year. That was when Joe Brady came in. He came in when they were 5-5. Question for you, okay? Josh Allen, since Joe Brady came in, had 9 games, including 2 playoff games. How many times in those 9 games did he go over 250 yards passing?
2. It wouldn't have been many.
Yeah, you're right, 2.
Yeah, thank you.
I
That's
hate that you
better than
got
my
that
shout
right.
earlier, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
twice he went over 250. One of them was in that Dallas blowout. So sort of keep that in mind. But well, I say one of them, he was like 91 or whatever. But there were games with some excuses. But the emphasis was on running the ball. He's got an ADP of 22. Jalen Hurts is 35. Take Jalen Hurts. If you want one of the big guys, take Jalen Hurts. He's going to be far better. Take Lamar Jackson. His upside is far, far bigger as well. I am out on Josh Allen at his ADP.
Yeah, I think that is quite controversial because, as you're saying, he is generally going as QB1 in the fantasy redraft leagues. Dynasty, he's probably going overall number one or very close to. So, yeah, it's a controversial take. I don't hate it. I understand that he's not got very many weapons. I did see that Keon Coleman was working with CD Lamb this week, and he looked very good on social media. But he's a rookie, so he's not gonna, he's not gonna be wide receiver one or anything this year. The one thing I disagree with, I think he probably will run in 15 touchdowns or very similar to that this year. I think it's going to be quite a run heavy offense, obviously due to the lack of receivers. Maybe they just put it all on Allen because people just can't tackle him seemingly in the red zone.
Fair, fair. We have had year in, year out. I'm not going to run the ball as much now. I'm not going to run the ball. You might have to, Josh.
Yeah,
that might be the job for this year. Do you know who I don't want to draft as much as Josh Allen?
go on.
His brother, Keenan Allen. Not brother, but same name. I'm just against the Allen clan. I really don't want any of Keenan Allen this year in redraft. Like, he was 10th in total targets last year. He was the only guy in LA. He was the only one that they could possibly throw to. 10th in total targets, 150 targets in total. He missed the last 4 games, and I think he played the last couple that he did banged up. DJ Moore, who's now his teammate, was 18th in total targets, 136 overall. He's joined Rome Odunze, he's joined DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift is there, Gerald Everett, and he's got a rookie quarterback. That rookie quarterback could be the best thing that we've ever seen in Caleb Williams, but he's got an ADP of 52. Again, I will read out players that are going in and around him. Tank Dell is 48. Zay Flowers is 49. T. Higgins is 54. George Pickens is 55. Amari Cooper, 58. Christian Kirk, 65. Jordan Addison, 68. Chris Godwin, 75. Calvin Ridley, 79. I think I'd rather all of those guys over Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, to be honest. I was a bit tentative with your Josh Allen shout, but Keenan Allen I agree with. I mean, this guy's entering his veteran parts of his career, basically. He's always been that mainstay, hasn't he, in the LA offense? He's been the guy that will catch 10, 15-yard routes constantly and get them first downs. He's gone from a wide receiver room that was basically empty to one that is now full. He will still pick up yards, but I don't think he's going to get many touchdowns, and also his target share is going to drop. So I'm definitely with you here.
Yeah, I think he's going to be... He will be a help for Caleb Williams, for sure. Having a guy like that, he's 32 years old, he's been in the league for as long as we can remember. He's going to help out Caleb Williams, but that might just be 4 catches a week. For Keenan Allen, that's not enough to do what you want Keenan Allen to do. Also, the big difference that he's got is that he's playing in the cold for the first time in his career as a home player. He played in college in California. Obviously, he joined San Diego. He then went to, or with the team, to Los Angeles. Chicago gets very, very cold. It's going to be very different for him. So do not draft Keenan Allen, probably at all. I don't think he's going to get to a spot. I would rather JSN over Keenan Allen, and JSN is 96.
To be fair, I can see that. Keenan Allen will definitely be falling through our Dynasty or Dynasty League anyway. I'm going to end this segment with arguably the most controversial of all, because I know this guy has a lot of fans. He's young. He's one of the most explosive players in the league, and it's Travis Etienne. Do not draft Travis Etienne at his average draft position. That's the key part. I know you hate it, but it's controversial, and I'm coming with it. He's obviously worth drafting if he falls in your leagues, but at his position, I don't like him at all. Now, as I say, one of the most explosive players in the league, but his durability over the last 2 years has been phenomenal. He's played 17 games in each season. An injury is sure to come. They give him the ball constantly. He is used 30 times, 35 times per game. He runs extremely hard. Obviously, he gets hits from linebackers, safeties, etc. He's used in the passing game as well. I think after a couple of heavy years, they're either one, going to see him pick up an injury, and which will cause him to lose a game or two, they're going to reduce his workload. And maybe the second point there is the most crucial to why you shouldn't draft him at his average draft position. Now, I also believe that the Jaguars are going to try and utilize Tank Bigsby, RB2 right now. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be sharing carries with Travis Etienne by any means, but he's definitely going to have more of an impact this year in the offense than he did last year. And that will impact Travis's score in fantasy football. I just don't think he's going to be matching his 1,000 rushing yards and 11 TDs from last year. And I would much rather have someone like Brees Hall or Jahmyr Gibbs. I think those two are much more likely to be your solid fancy RB number one in your team. Travis Etienne, not sold on him. I wouldn't be drafting him.
Fair enough, but you mentioned Brees Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs. They're going a fair bit earlier. If you're drafting,
for sure.
if you're drafting Travis Etienne, you've either got two studs at wide receiver and you're delighted with life, or he's going to be your RB2 to go along with Brees Hall or Jahmyr Gibbs. In that capacity, I love it. The one thing that's helping Travis Etienne out this year is I've done a few mock drafts so far, and you know the ones that I like most?
Go on.
When I get a good running back early. I think that's going to be the sort of MO this year. If you get Christian McCaffrey, if you get Bijan, Brees Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, great. But Travis Etienne, I think, is about the lowest guy that I'd be happy enough with. He's going after Josh Jacobs, which I don't like. I think Josh Jacobs should be a lot lower, and he almost made my list. But I still think Travis Etienne will have a good year. I take on your point regarding Tank Bigsby. Doug Peterson has come out and said we want to get Tank Bigsby more involved, take the workload off Travis Etienne. They said that last year. Didn't really happen. Tank Bigsby just kept on throwing the ball on the floor. I'm happy with Travis Etienne at 27. I will. If you're ahead of me in the draft, I will be delighted if Travis Etienne is on my board.
Yeah, I'll be sleeping on Travis all time long through the draft, so you'll be picking him up if you're directly after me. He's just not for me. As I say, I think he'll probably have a solid year, maybe 800 rushing yards, maybe 7 or 8 touchdowns. I just don't think he's going to have as good a year as he's shown in the last couple of seasons. I'd rather take someone else. And to be honest, in redraft leagues, I'm going to be heavy on wide receivers rather than running backs, contrasting strategy to you. So I think that kind of plays into my viewpoint here.
Players to avoid, players to draft in your fantasy leagues coming up. But let us know who you're with and also against your players to draft and players to avoid in the comments below. Also, we are going to be doing a listener league involving both myself and also Tom in the near future. If you are interested in that, leave a comment below. We'll be advertising it on social media as well, but just say that you want in effectively and we will put your name into the hat. But Tom, NFL episode number whatever it is in the books.
Yeah, exactly. And our first proper NFL fantasy episode. There'll be more of these to come, but obviously if you're on this podcast channel and you're looking for NFL bets and whatnot, which is kind of our speciality, don't worry about that. When we get towards the season, you'll see a lot more of that side of things. But right now, in the off-season, fantasy is the main talking point, and hopefully we provided some good insight there.
Absolutely. There'll be a horse racing podcast released later this week as well. So do go listen to that. But thank you very much for listening to the Turf and Touchdowns podcast. We'll be back with another NFL podcast in a couple of weeks. Until we next see you, stay safe, look after one another. Goodbye.